So when you think about myth, what comes to mind? My guess is there's probably some sort of association with untruth or non-factual, right? A myth is a lie. One of my favorite quotes is from anthropologist Joseph Campbell when he says that myths are a series of lies meant to reveal the truth. And really, when it comes to myth, they're not concerned with historical facts. They're concerned with hidden reality. What is unseen. They're not concerned with what happened in the past. They're actually concerned with what happens in the present, right now, all the time, what happens across time with people, right? I mean, just look at the Genesis creation myth through that lens, right? These humans are created naked and unashamed, walking with the divine in the cool of the day, right? There's no distinction between themselves and the world they're in. And eventually there is this separation from that world, and they discover their nakedness. They become conscious of the world around them. They become conscious of the parts of themselves they want to present and the parts of themselves they want to conceal. They start to have suspicion with this divine being. They have suspicion within themselves, with their community, with nature. That is our experience altogether. Each one of us have this kind of moment of consciousness, and then we are expelled out of this womb-like state of childhood where we have to really move into our own way of being, right? Where life is not entirely unconscious, but there is this navigating reality in a brand new way. Like, who are we? Who am I? What am I about? What do I want to do? That is the story, the mythology of Genesis, actually. And like any other creation myth, it's pointing people to themselves. It's actually quite new that we would think that a story like that could even be literal. Because again, even ancient people didn't care about it being literal. It didn't matter. They may have assumed that, but that wasn't the point. The point was that it did something to us here and now. So real quick, I want to share these 4 functions of mythology. This is from the mythologist Joseph Campbell, and in his book, Thou Art That, he says that there are 4 functions of myth. The first one is that myths awaken us to ourselves and to the divine or transcendent, right? Myths are essentially a collection of stories, symbols, metaphors, experiences that guide either an individual or a community towards the divine. It wakes us up to transcendent experience. That can happen in a church, that can happen in the forest, that can happen in a religious context, that can happen in the privacy of your own room. Like there are these awakening moments, and that's what the first function of myth is to awaken us to that which is beyond us. The second function of myth is to help us interpret our world. And depending on your myth or collection of symbols, metaphors, images, we will interpret our world differently. And we can see this with Christian nationalism. It really doesn't matter what, quote unquote, the Bible says for Christian nationalists. It's already through some sort of myth that they have, again, not lie, but a collection of stories and images and symbols that filter what they see. Because it's that filter that then allows them to see what they want to see. Right? It is helping them interpret everything from that lens. So there is an impossibility of seeing it differently because their mythology has filtered out anything that contradicts the stories, symbols, and images therein. So, third function, myths validate and support the moral order stated in laws, right? So myths, whatever our myth is, tells us what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what is allowable, what is unallowable. And when that mythology becomes very rigid, as we can see with Christian nationalism right at this moment, it excludes core essential parts of humanity under some sort of guise of morality, right? We can't include or accept that person or those people or even that part of people because our moral code, our ethic, which is essentially about supremacy and power and dominance, does not allow for that, because that is some sort of weakness or deficiency according to our mythology, and therefore it is not desired, right? So on the positive side, let me just kind of make this note, right? Function 2, for example, like if our myth tells us that the divine is found in the poor, that the divine is found in taking in the stranger or the immigrant, or that the divine is found in the marginalized person or the trans youth that has been ostracized from their family and friends. If our myth tells us that, interprets our world and says, hey, that's where the divine is, or in function 1, if you want to experience the divine, go to the outsider, go to the stranger, then we will move that direction. That is why myths are not good or bad. They are, like many things, how they're used and how they are engaged. Now, the fourth function of myth is what I really want to focus on here, because that fourth function is that myths carry us through the various stages and crises of life by getting us in touch with the source of regenerative power. So let me break that down. Myths, that fourth function is that myths carry us through the various stages of life. Okay? From childhood to adolescence. That's a transition. It's a threshold from one stage to the next. Adolescence to adulthood, that's another transition. Adulthood, there are multiple transitions that happen or can happen in a person's life. And our myth is what helps us tie those two things together. It helps us to create cohesion between what was, what is, and what will be. It carries us through that threshold, right? What is a threshold, or a stage or a crisis, right? We're talking about a point that comes after a certain span of time and before the next span of time. A threshold before, like you walk out of one room into another room, you're going to enter through a threshold. And that threshold is this liminal space where you're neither in the old room or in the new room. You are in this in-between, which is what a crisis or a transition in your stage of life would be. And what we need in those moments is to get in touch with this regenerative power that allows us to reconnect with ourselves, because while we were in the previous room, we developed certain beliefs, certain ways of interpreting our world, certain moral and moralistic beliefs, taboos, that will not serve us in the next room. It will not allow us to unfold and evolve and become more fully who we are. And now, I get it. You're like, Michael, you're assuming that that's the point. Well, yeah, there you go. So functions 1, 2, and 3 may, let's say the Christian nationalist or just even general evangelical Christian sense of that, is that the point isn't to become more fully you. The point is to become more fully God. Well, let's put it the way they put it. The point is to become more Christ-like, more obedient, more, become lesser, actually, and therefore God becomes more. So it's about diminishing the self. So that's kind of part of the problem, though, is in all of my years working with people, whether as a shadow work facilitator or the years I was a pastor, is that myth of I have to diminish in order for God to, expand, and grow in the world, my life is in service to God alone, and there's nothing self about it. I see people hit a crisis, a threshold where that no longer works. It does not work for them. They cannot continue to live. They have hit a point where the repression and the suppression of emotions, instincts, desires, sexuality, which is in the realm of instincts, but it's such a common one because sexuality is so repressed. All of that built up energy pushes them to a point of such crisis that they're going to lose everything, potentially even their own life, if they don't find a way forward. And they know that that way forward is not in the old myth. It's not in the old stories. It's not in the old images. It's not in the songs, the worship songs. It's not in the sermons. And they certainly can't bring this up to their pastor, except for in the stint where I was their pastor and they could bring it up to me. But most of the time, that's not the case. And so they had to find a new myth. And you don't just go finding a new myth like a buried treasure. No, that myth finds you, actually. You start to be carried along into these new experiences that then create new images, that create new symbols. And that becomes the new myth. And that is the self, what I have here, the capital S self. It is the self that we get connected with that then realigns us and regenerates us back to who we really are. But instead of that being an unconscious Garden of Eden state where we're naked and unashamed, it's now a brand new state of existing in that sort of authenticity, but consciously existing in that, right? So, I'm going to skip forward here. So the fourth function of myth, I already read this, but I'll read it again. Myths carry us through the various stages and crises of life by getting us in touch with the source of regenerative power, the self. The fourth function addresses the question, how can I be reborn? So if it is about being reborn, you are entering into a new stage of life, what do you need? What do you need in order to be reborn? What do you need to take hold of? What do you need to let go of? What is no longer serving you? And when I say you, I don't mean the ego. I mean, what is no longer serving the true life, the vitality, the energetic you, the authentic you? What is no longer serving that? Because if there isn't anything serving that, if your myth is no longer serving that, then it at least needs to be questioned. It at least needs some conscious observation to see, is it still worth aligning with that? Or am I trying to simply latch my life on or wrap my life around something that no longer supports my life or the life that's unfolding within me? If you'd like, this is the kind of work I do. This is what shadow work is. Shadow work is helping you get in touch with that source, get in touch with the stories and the images and the symbols that are already happening in you. You don't have to go find them. You just have to look and be aware and risk aligning with yourself at the potential cost of misaligning with a structure or a community that truly no longer supports your growth towards wholeness. Schedule a free 20-minute discovery call and let's see if this is a good fit. I'd love to journey with you. Okay, take good care.